All right, this is the 10.3 instructional video for Math 30-1, and we're going to talk about function composition, which can be written a couple different ways. We can write it as f open dot g of x, which is to say f of g of x, which immediately looks a little more complex than addition or subtraction, and it is really important that the order in which you put those function matters. If I were to talk about g open dot f of x, this would be function g with function f in for its input. And I would like to show you those at least a couple times. It is just the idea that whatever value we pick for x has to go through function f first, and then it has to go through function g. Now, really what that means is that if an input isn't valid for the inner function, then it can't be valid for the outer function. And we'll work through those as we go through the examples. But I'd like to give you an example of what this looks like, and that's going to be relatively easy. So let's say that f of x was x squared plus 3x, and then I'll say that g of x was, just so that we do get that input problem, I'm going to make that equal to the square root of x minus 1. Now, it's worth mentioning from all the, the work we've done in the past, because g of x is the root of x minus 1, x must be greater than or equal to 1. Now, the reason why that's so important is let's first take a look at f of g of x. Now, what f of g of x, what that notation is telling us is to take the function f, and anywhere we see that input variable x, replace it with the entire function g. And I'm going to write that in a real general way. Function f is conveniently right above. Function f is x squared plus 3 times that x. But because it's f of g of x, that's going to be whatever g of x is squared plus 3 times whatever g of x is. Now, that is f of g of x for this context, but we know what g of x is. So I can go a little bit further, and I can say that's the square root of x minus 1, that's function g squared, plus 3 times the square root of x minus 1. That's function g again. And that's why the restriction carries through, because in f of g of x, we still have the square root of x minus 1. So if I try to put x is equal to 0 in there, I end up taking the square root of a negative. The only other thing I want to do in this instructional video is to show you that you can use it in both directions. So in red here, I'm going to do g of f of x. Now, this is the same concept. I'm going to take function g, which is directly above, again, on purpose. And anywhere I see that input variable x, I'm going to replace it with function f. And I'm going to write in a general way first that this would be the square root of function f minus 1. Now, that means that g of f of x for these two specific functions is going to be the square root of x squared plus 3x, which is function f minus 1. And we could simplify that a little bit and say that g of f of x is equal to the square root of x squared plus 3x minus 1. Now, this can certainly get confusing if you look at it all at once, but it really just is more function notation and getting used to a new operation, which is the composition of two functions, namely putting a function into another function.